The guitar is an amazing thing. It's been around for 500, 600, 700 years. In an acoustic guitar like this, the design is well over a century old. It's the only other instrument besides the piano where you can play chords. I mean, there are a few other things, but actually this is the main one. Now I'm going to start from the very beginning on this, because there are a few techniques, a few things to avoid and a few things to remember along the way. Let's have a look. So the guitar is a fretted instrument. The physics behind it is basically you have to press the strings down until the string actually touches the fret. So wherever you are on the guitar, the string has to firmly touch the metal fret in order to make a noise. Otherwise it will just sound dull and muted. That's the noise you want. So the first rule is to play any of the notes on the guitar, you need to be right behind the fret, not away from it or in front of the previous one, but behind the one that you actually want. So you're almost playing on the fret. Now I'm going to start off with a D chord. So this involves using the first three strings on the guitar. They're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, 6 being the thickest string. So I'm going to play a D chord. I'm just going to play it and then I'll explain the movements, the techniques on how to get this to work. There's my D chord. So my first string then, on the second fret space up, I put my middle finger down. Now, first of all, we've got to make sure that we bring our hand round the guitar neck like this, so that there's plenty of space underneath your hand so you're not gripping the neck. The moment you grip the guitar really hard like that, it's not going to work. You need to make sure that you approach with your fingers all agile and all able to move independently. So your thumb will probably press down really on the center of the back of the neck rather than curling round like this. So my D chord then, I'm going to put my middle finger on the second fret on the first string so that I get this note. The open string is that note. Now my index finger is going to press down on the third string but on the same fret as my middle finger. So I end up with this. Notice that I push this finger all the way up to the fret itself, not behind it like that. Because don't forget, you might get that muted or buzzy sound, whereas we want this. So my middle finger goes here like that. My index finger on the third string, same fret, and then my annular finger comes across to play the second string, but at the third fret. Now the difficulty with this is that this finger must play this note, but avoid touching the string either side, so that I get all of my notes. Because if I flatten the finger slightly, I get those sort of muted notes. So you've got to make sure that you approach the guitar from as vertical a position as possible. That's where your thumb coming round the back of the neck will aid that. It may seem a bit sort of unnatural at first, but you get used to it. You get used to bringing your hand all the way round. So I've got the first string, second fret with my middle finger. Then I've got my annular finger on the third fret, second string. My index finger on the third string, second fret. And then I have an open fourth string. A D chord, you really only play the first 4 strings. If I played all 6, I get this sort of bottom heavy sort of noise, and actually that string isn't actually a note that's in a D chord. The 5th string would work, but it's much more solid and it sounds definitely a sort of a truer chord when you have the 4th string and down. Now that's the left hand. The principles are you've just got to make sure that you get right up to the fret like this. Bring your hand round so that your fingers play individual strings and don't touch adjacent ones. And then your right hand strums across the strings with a plectrum or just your fingers. If you haven't got a plectrum, you can just use your fingers instead. And there is also a technique called finger picking, where actually you're playing individual notes to get them like sort of arpeggiated sort of sound like that. So there is that finger picking technique as well as using the plectrum. If you're playing a rhythm, get used to doing downstrokes and upstrokes. What you can then do is mute some of them, or rather you're playing across the strings but you're not quite touching the strings. And then you can play any of the strums that you like by simply lowering your hand, a bit like lowering a stylus onto a record. Notice that I'm also really only aiming for those 4 strings. You don't want to have the 5th and the 6th in a D chord. So in that respect, the strumming across the strings may be a little bit more tricky with the D chord. So I'm going to show you a couple of other chords, and then we're going to try and change between them. So I've got a D chord here, and then I've got an A chord here. Now what happens is here we've got 3 fingers on 3 separate strings, but they're all in the same fret. So we have this problem where the finger is actually playing slightly further back because it's being essentially blocked from playing just behind the fret by these other 2 fingers. The downside is that you've got to make sure that the index finger presses down harder in order that it makes a sound, because if I do this, this finger and this finger here are not actually pressing down hard enough. So just to reiterate where the fingers are, the first string is left unplayed. It's just open. I have my annular finger, this finger here, on the 2nd fret on the 2nd string. Then my middle finger on the 3rd string 2nd fret. And then my index finger on the 4th string 2nd fret. And there's my A chord. I have 5 strings now here. If I play the 6th, it's okay, because it's actually a note that's in the chord. So you can strum all 6 with an A chord. Notice with my right hand here I was strumming a bit faster, but only just strumming some of the strokes that I wanted. The rest being sort of suspended above the guitar. So there's my A chord. So I'm having to press down more with these fingers. Do this in sort of short practice bursts. You can see the sort of ridges on my fingers there. I've been doing it for years, so it's okay. I've sort of developed sort of slightly harder fingertips. But just do it in sort of short bursts. As soon as anything starts to hurt, either it's because you've got the wrong posture or you're just doing it a little bit too much, just warm into things. So now's the time to change between one chord and the other. Now this involves essentially moving one finger at a time and working out where each finger is going to go. So if I've got a D chord here, my first chord that I showed you just now, in order to get to an A chord, I'm going to move my index finger first. So I'm going to move up a string and down slightly within that fret space. Then my middle finger is going to move up 2 strings, and then my annular finger is going to move down a fret but stay on that one string. So just to go through those movements again, from the D chord, I take my index finger, move it down a string, up a string rather, from 3rd to 4th strings, and then I'm going to move my middle finger up 2 strings, and then my annular finger moves down a fret, and then I may need to just adjust the distance of the fingers so that I can get all of those notes to sound. Now you can think of it in any order you like. I could say, well, I'm actually going to start with this finger. I'm going to just slide it down a fret, and then my other two fingers basically go behind it like that. You could think of it that way. Whichever way you want to do it is absolutely fine, but stick with that one method. And of course, getting from A back to D, I might think, well, I'm just going to move that finger up a fret, and then these two go either side of it to form my D. Now, as soon as you're happy with the changes between these two chords, it's time to integrate it with some sort of beat. Now, we could do 4 strokes on each chord. Doesn't leave much time to change those chords, but we could keep our 4/4 beat there, the 4 beats in a bar, and I could strum 3 beats, but the 4th one could be silent to allow me a little bit more time to change that chord. So 1, 2, 3, change. 1, 2, 3, change. 1, 2, 3, change. 1, 2, 3, change, etc. So you're just going between these chords like that. Now the position of your thumb on the back of the neck with the A chord, because I'm having to press this one down a little bit harder, I'm going to make sure that the thumb and this are really squeezing together, because actually this finger, it's reasonably easy because it's right next to that fret there. Now if I took my thumb away, becomes really hard to press down, so your thumb must grip the other side of the neck like this, keeping the space underneath the neck so that you're not having this extra dimension of contact with the guitar. So there we are, there are 2 chords, a D chord and an A chord. Whichever chord you learn next, it's the same principle, just making sure that you come round the neck and then make sure that your fingers approach from a vertical stance onto the fingerboard as you possibly can. Because chords like G, that's a bit of a fistful, because we've got a finger either side of the guitar and the possibility of muting strings in between. So we need to be really, really poised with your left hand position there. So there's a G, for example. C. So all of these chord shapes, it's the same principle, and you're better off learning new chords by playing a song with chords you know and introducing one chord at a time. It's always best to do this in a sort of vocational sense. So there it is, there's the beginnings of playing guitar.